We have an absolute dream final of the World Cup between world's number one, Magnus Carlsen, who is playing against the Indian prodigy, 18 years old only, Ramesh Babu Praggnanandhaa, who is having a fantastic tournament so far, eliminating one of the pre-tournament favorites, Hikaru Nakamura, and also yesterday managed to eliminate Fabiano Caruana in a thriller of a tiebreak. Now, let's see what's gonna happen at this final. This is gonna be really exciting, and I also would like to mention that there's also a game for the third place between Nijat Abbasov and Fabiano Caruana, and I would recommend you to check out my channel for the coverage of their first game. Now, first we are going to have a look at what Praggnanandhaa is going to play here with white, starting with 1c4, and after the game Magnus said that he was actually a bit surprised seeing this move. I mean, Pragg has played this many times before, but being not in best physical shape because of food poisoning, he probably had no time to prepare too extensively. So he went for classical setup against the English, knight c3, knight f6, knight f3, knight c6, and Pragg goes for the move g3, which he has played also earlier in the tournament against Hikaru, and Hikaru played the move knight d4. Interesting line, but the main line for black here is the move d5, getting some sort of Sicilian with reversed colors, opening the center, cd5, knight takes d5, bishop to g2. And here the first interesting moment of the game, I would say, because there are various ways to play here for black. The main line continues with dropping back with a knight to b6. Also, bishop c5 is a very active way of handling this variation. But Magnus went for a small think here and tried to surprise here Pragg with the move knight f6. The knight is not badly placed, it's very solid, but you would expect it to be somewhat more harmoniously placed next to the other knight on b6. But this is a very interesting line, has been played before during pandemic in some online events by Magnus himself. But what Magnus probably didn't expect or didn't know is that Pragg was very well prepared for it, because only a few weeks, 2 months ago, he played with black the very same line with the black pieces in a rapid tournament in Hungary, in which Pragg's opponent played the move d3, but Pragg goes for the critical move. Instead of playing a modest move d3, he goes for b4. And that's trying to put immediate pressure on that knight, as white is about to go for the move b5. But first things first, this pawn on b4 can be taken in two different ways. If you capture with a knight, then white gets the chance to take the central pawn on e5 with a knight. So this is actually very nice for white. The other capture with the bishop on b4 is also not great, as it runs into a very thematical, tactical idea based on the move knight takes e5 as well. If you capture the knight, now the queen comes out with check, hitting the bishop on b4. If you try to save the bishop with knight c6, then you eliminate the defender first, and after b takes c6, white regains the material by taking with the queen on b4, and white is having a fantastic position thanks to the favorable structure. That shows that both the captures on b4 are not very attractive for black, and black better tries to anticipate the move b4, b5. Magnus in an earlier game against Nepomniachtchi played here the move a6. It's actually quite a reasonable move, but for this occasion he rather wants to develop its bishop first to d6. So the bishop overprotects the pawn on e5. White plays the move b5, attacking the knight on c6, and the knight comes into to d4. This is already quite an original position, has never been seen before, but it's top line of the engine, so probably both players were still kind of familiar with this, but Magnus already spent a considerable amount of time. One of the ideas is that white cannot really take on d4. He can do it, but then the knight is in a bit of trouble, and the pawn on d4 is actually quite nice. Black will be able to complete its development very fast and put a rook on the open file to put some pressure there, get the bishop out. No problems here for black at all. So the best move here for white is queen to a4. A remarkable move. If you don't see this, if you haven't seen this position before, you would expect white to play a move like castling kingside. But with the move queen a4, you're increasing the pressure against that knight. Both the queen and the knight are attacking that knight on d4, and black got to decide what to do. You can draw back with the knight to e6. Interesting idea, so that maybe later on the knight can even come to c5. I think white is actually quite comfortable there as well, but Magnus plays it as solid as possible. Goes for knight takes f3, bishop takes f3, trading of the knights, and now continues with castling kingside. White does the same. And having a look at this position, you would think that white is a bit better here, thanks to this long-term pressure being exerted by the bishop on this long diagonal. The pawn on b7 is sort of a problem, but black goes for the move a6. I like this move quite a lot. Very nice thematical move with the idea that after b takes a6, you can recapture with a rook. There's no need to get your bishop out from c8 yet. You can develop your rook in this particular way, attacking the queen, and if the queen goes away, you can even play the move c6, and all the pressure has been taken away. The bishop can no longer exert pressure against these pawns. So in fact, I think black would be very comfortable. Therefore, white is recommended here to maintain the pawn on b5, played here the move d3, planning to get the bishop out to g5, and maybe knight d5 can be played with the typical pressure on this knight on f6. So h6 is the best move here for black, preventing the bishop from getting to that square. And Pragg goes bishop a3. So he wants to get rid of black's bishop on d6, which is not very active, but it's holding the position together. Pawn on e5 is very well supported. And well, one of the main problems here for black is the pressure against the rook on a8 indirectly. You cannot take on b5 as the rook is unprotected. So Magnus played here rook b8. I like this move very much, and it's a very subtle idea, as you would think, okay, now black is about to take on b5. But what happens if white is capturing the pawn on a6? Black doesn't want to recapture with the pawn on a6, because that leaves the pawn structure not very nice. Isolated pawns on the queen side, long-term targets for white's major pieces. But Magnus set up a little threat here, little tactic, as after b takes a6, he would definitely have played here bishop to d7, attacking the queen, and the queen is in trouble, as it needs to keep the bishop on a3 defended. After queen to b3, there is b takes a6, and now the main idea of having the rook on b8 has been revealed. The queen is under threat. If the queen goes away, the bishop on a3 is going to be taken, which means that black is winning material. And for that reason, b takes a6 is a serious mistake, can't be played. But therefore, rook b8 is a very nice, classy move, enabling the pawn from a6 to move very soon. Here, Pragg thought that maybe he had something, a bit of pressure here, but it's not really easy to prove. Played here move bishop takes d6, and now Magnus recaptures with the c pawn. So we do get some sort of symmetrical position. Rook a b1, a takes b5, queen takes b5, bishop to d7, attacking the queen. Queen goes to b6, offering the exchange of queens, but there's also a bit of pressure against both the pawn on b7 and the pawn on d6. However, with the move bishop c6, black seems to be solving all its problems. The pawn on d6 is now nicely defended, and it should be pointed out that after bishop takes c6, b takes c6, still pieces can be swapped, but definitely white is not able to take the pawn on c6 for free, because it allows rook c8 attacking the queen, and if the queen goes away, the knight on c3 is hanging. It's unprotected, and therefore white is losing material in this case. After bishop c6, Pragg played here the move queen takes d8. So queens are coming off the board. Magnus recaptures with the rook, and I think black is very solid, and maybe actually white is the one who got to be a little bit careful not ending up with problems regarding that pawn on the a file. Bishop takes c6 played. I'm not sure that is the best move, because now black's pawns are connected again. No weaknesses in in black's pawn structure. You may think, okay, white has a passed pawn, but this pawn is not really getting far. King g2, rook a8, nice move. Not minding white is able to play here the move rook b6 to attack the pawn on c6, because the other rook comes over to the c file to protect the pawn on c6. Rook c1, the other rook comes there as well. The knight on c3 still keeps the pawn on a2 defended. But here black played the move d5. Nice pawn center, grabbing a bit of space. Rook c2, overprotecting the pawn on a2, because you had to reckon here also with ideas based on d5, d4 to attack the knight. If the knight goes away, the pawn would be hanging, but now the rook on c2 also helps out. Knight e7, attacking the rook, forcing the rook to go back again. And here various possibilities for both sides. One idea could be to bring the king to the center, very thematical way of playing, but Magnus first wants to activate its knight. Played here knight c5. Knight is unprotected on this square, but of course these guys had seen, of course, that knight takes d5 is not a tactic which is working. Attacking the knight on c5. After c takes d5, the rook protects the knight again. So that doesn't work. Rook bc1 played, intending now to take on d5, as the knight on c5 will be attacked by both the rooks. But rook a5 is a simple way to deal with all the threats, overprotecting the knight. Also, black has additional plans of doubling the rooks on the a file. Knight to b1, maybe a remarkable move, but there are no other active squares the knight can go to. Knight e6, the knight is rock solid there. It's supported by the pawn. White may consider here to take on c6, but after the exchange of one pair of rooks, black captures the pawn on a2, and probably the position is very equal. But if someone is better, it's probably black due to the somewhat more active placement of the rook and the advanced pawns in the center. Anyway, didn't happen. White went for the move knight to d2, trying to get a knight into play, maybe to b3. Also knight f3 is a possibility to attack the pawn on e5. Rook c2, a8. And now there is this move knight to f3, attacking the pawn. f6 is one idea, but if you played it, then rook takes c6 is an idea, after which the knight is unprotected. So Magnus's idea is to play e4, to advance the pawn, to attack the knight on f3. D takes e4, d takes e4, and now knight to d2. Attacking the knight, attacking the pawn with a knight, and here e3 is played. Also a nice little idea. Before taking the pawn on a2, black is intending to weaken white's pawn structure. After f takes e3, there is rook takes a2. Materials even number of pawns, but I quite dislike the double pawns on the e-file. Note that rook takes c6 is not an option for white, as it hangs the knight on d2. Therefore, rather than taking the pawn on e3, Pragg played knight c4, attacking the rook as well as the pawn on e3. Rook takes a2, knight takes e3. So no double pawns. It's still 4 versus 4, but white's pawn structure looks much healthier now. Knight e4, very concrete move, putting pressure on the rook on c2. Rooks are getting swapped here. And after rook c4, the knight is under threat. You can take the pawn on e2 right away, but Magnus played first the move c5, cementing that knight on d4. Of course, the pawn on c5 can be taken, but after rook takes e2, it's a 3 versus 3, rook and knight each, and the players had seen enough for today. A draw was agreed on Magnus, his proposal. So a very solid start of this game. Very interesting opening choice. It seemed as if Pragg was a bit better out of the opening, but Magnus, despite the food poisoning, managed to hold on relatively easily in this game. So a draw is a start. Fireworks are to be expected in the next game and possibly even in a tiebreak. Tomorrow, Danny will be back with the coverage of that second game on the PowerPlayChess channel. But also don't forget to check out my own channel, as I will cover also the final game myself. Thanks for watching and see you soon. Bye bye.